Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Sam Robbins. Now, today is an important topic, and it's about anxiety and the different types of anxiety disorders and how it affects your health and daily performance. This includes both adults over the age of 18 as well as teenagers, which sadly have even more anxiety than adults. Now, keep in mind that anxiety disorders also often occur with other disorders such as depression, eating disorders, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder for both adults and children. Now, I'm going to quickly cover the various forms of anxiety, and then I'd like to get your feedback about which topics you'd like me to cover in detail in future videos, as well as questions you may have about today's topics. And I'll also end with some natural ways to help control and fix some of your anxiety. And in future videos, I'll give a simple quiz so you can quickly find out if you have anxiety and more so how severe it is. However, statistically speaking, over 75% of the population has felt some form of anxiety. Globally speaking, 1 in 13 people suffer from anxiety on a regular basis. Now, in the U.S., anxiety disorders are the most common form of mental illness, affecting over 40 million adults over the age of 18. That's about 20% of the population. And anxiety disorders also affect over 25% of teenagers, and that's children between the ages of 13 to 18 years old. Now, research shows that untreated children with anxiety disorder are at a higher risk to perform poorly in school, miss out on important social experiences, and engage in substance abuse. So if you have children, please make sure you watch this video and also share it with a friend who also has children. Unfortunately, anxiety also negatively affects your emotional and physical health, because people with anxiety disorders are 5 times more likely to go to the doctor and 6 times more likely to be hospitalized for psychiatric disorders. And part of the reason for this is that internal stress that you're dealing with causes hormonal imbalances, which lowers your immune system and causes fatigue. Now, the good news is that anxiety disorders are highly preventable, treatable, and even curable. Yet, unfortunately, only about 37% of people suffering receive treatment, and this is usually in the form of harmful, addictive medications. And because there are so many different forms of anxiety disorders, the cause and development is complex. However, it includes primarily genetics, hormonal imbalances, and also brain chemistry. However, life events, trauma, and lifestyle are all contributing factors. Now, it's important to note that people with anxiety also suffer from depression and vice versa. In fact, it's about 50% of the time that if you have one, you also have the other. Okay, so let's start, and I'll quickly cover the 6 primary forms of anxiety and some important statistics. See which one you identify with the most. Now, the first one is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. Now, GAD affects 7 million adults, or 3% of the U.S. population, yet only 43% receive treatment. Interestingly, women are twice as likely to be affected as men, and this is primarily because of the higher female hormones, more specifically estrogens. Then we have panic disorder. Now, PD have similar stats to GAD, to GAD, affecting almost 6.5 million adults, or 2.7% of the U.S. population. Again, women are twice as likely to be affected as men. Then we have social anxiety disorder. Now, SAD affects 15 million adults, or about 7% of the U.S. population, so this is a big one. SAD is equally common among men and women, typically begins around the age of 13, right around puberty, again, when all the hormones begin to change. Unfortunately, 36% of people with social anxiety disorder report experiencing symptoms for over 10 years or more before seeking any kind of help. Listen, that's a lot of years to be suffering needlessly. Now, the next big one is specific phobias. And I was surprised to find out that specific phobias affect almost 20 million adults, or 9% of the U.S. population. I honestly had no idea it was such a large amount. Once again, women are twice as likely to be affected as men. Symptoms typically begin also in childhood. The average age of onset is actually 7 years old, which is really young. Then we have post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, PTSD affects almost 8 million adults, or 4% of the U.S. population. Unfortunately, rape is the most likely trigger of PTSD. 65% of men and 46% of women who are raped will develop this disorder. Childhood sexual abuse is a strong predictor of lifetime likelihood of developing PTSD. And finally, we have obsessive compulsive disorder. And OCD affects about 2 million adults and 1% of the U.S. population. Now, OCD is equally common among men and women. And the average age of onset is 19 years old, with 25% of the cases occurring by age 13. Again, right around that time that puberty and the hormonal changes start. Okay, so let's now talk about some treatments, and there are a lot of treatments. The first is medication. Of course, we've all heard about the prescription drugs, and I'm sure you know someone who has taken an anti-anxiety or antidepressant, maybe even yourself. Unfortunately, 95% of the time, these drugs are incorrectly prescribed, resulting in more problems later, including addiction. Listen, drugs are very powerful, and there's so many different ones, so I prefer using this drugs as a last option, and make sure you find a really good doctor who will first at least listen thoroughly before prescribing any drug. And do so and start at a much lower dosage just to see how your body reacts, and then over time adjust accordingly. Then we have therapy, and I think therapy is great. Of course, it takes time, many weeks, months, and maybe even years, so you need to be patient and you need to make a commitment. And finding a good therapist, I believe, is probably the biggest challenge. Now, what I love about the internet is you really have access to almost everything, and this includes finding a licensed therapist and professional counselor. In fact, it can all be done online, so you can do it at the comfort of your own home. Now, one place you may want to visit online that I've heard some good things about is called BetterHelp.com. Now, I haven't used their services, so I can't personally endorse it, but it doesn't hurt for you to take a look. Then we have lifestyle improvements. As I said earlier, genetics aside, a major cause of anxiety and depression is the imbalance in hormones and brain chemistry, and lifestyle for sure affects this. Listen, the topic of hormones is just too complicated to get into today's video. However, again, if you're interested, let me know below in the comment section. I'll get deeper on this topic. You also need to improve your diet. This means getting rid of addictive foods and sugars and bad fats and optimizing your insulin levels, all which affect your mood. Again, if you want more information about this topic, please let me know below in the comments section. I'll do a more detailed video. Exercise is very important because it helps create positive, happy hormones and brain chemicals. And I'll keep this very simple. Honestly, just spend about 30 minutes daily moving your body and using your muscles. And I prefer doing this outside if possible. Listen, even going for a simple 15-minute walk will reboot your system and you'll feel better. And finally, there are natural herbs, plant extracts, and vitamins and minerals and specific amino acids that will quickly help optimize your brain chemistry by improving chemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, and hormones like cortisol levels, all of which affect your mood, both mental and physical. Now, it's not a cure, obviously, and nothing really is, but it will help almost give you quick relief from anxiety, worry, and dramatically decrease symptoms of depression. In fact, I've used these natural ingredients at night to help me relax, after a long, stressful day, so I can just fall asleep faster and stay asleep. And I'll be honest, it's made a massive improvement in my life because I also wake up just feeling so much more focused, calm, and relaxed. It makes dealing with life stresses, honestly, so much easier and more manageable. Anyway, you can get the details below about natural ingredients in the description area. Just click the link and let me know how it works for you. Well, that's it for today. I hope this video gave you more clarity. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. As always, thanks for listening and have a happy and healthy day.